It was lovely, listening to Eka, Anu, everyone. I'm Sonali Gupta. I'm a clinical psychologist. I primarily work around mental health. As a therapist, I'm an author too. Today, I'm going to be talking about what self care looks like. We are living at a time where I think hashtag self care has been trending. So I'm going to take a deep dive and quickly jump into how would I begin by defining what self care looks like. And I'm going to be doing a focus today on what women can do in order to take care of their own, self care wherever they are. So let me begin, maybe with a quick definition, that how I would define it. And yes, if you think you have questions, comments throughout, feel free to, share it, put in there. I'm just going to remove this charger, remove it from the frame. Yeah. So here it is. I think right away, I think one of my definitions is that self-care is a conscious process of hosting ourselves and also building a safe space for ourselves. We live at a time, and maybe for years where women have been used to hosting others, right? But very often women forget what's it like to host themselves, and maybe more so during the pandemic, right? Where we haven't gotten a chance to host ourselves as we manage work and also our personal life. So the key is, how do you take care of yourself and build safe spaces to host yourself? That's the very first important key to self care right there. Moving forward, I'm going to take a leaf out of what Rachna said, that, where she was talking about choice. I think when it comes to self care is a choice that we all make, and not making that choice is a choice in itself, right? I think the strange thing is, I don't know, I turned 40 this year, milestone birthday. I don't know how many of you, who are listening here, if you were told or thought about self care or taking care of yourself. So tell me, for those of you who are listening here, did your parents, friends have a conversation with you where you were told that carve out spaces for yourself, build self care into your routine? Maybe in the chat, if you're comfortable, you can mention it. I can tell you, while I was studying as a therapist or in a personal space, that was not a conversation or something that I was trained into. That I was told one needs to build in on a regular basis. And I think the generation, that's now with technology, internet, the same conversation is becoming far more common. And we are talking about self care far more. So the first is, choose to make it a choice, not something that just happens if you have time saved at the end of the day. And the second thing that I'm going to jump into is, what's the framework that one can use in the context of what self-care looks like? I think if we can answer um, what self-care is and how can you do it and how do you build space for it and why do you need it, I think we are on a good track, right, to begin with just itself. Richa, Simran, they are saying it never existed 40, 50 years ago, no guidance towards. I think even 20 years back when I passed out of college, I think even then the conversation didn't exist, right? One was told, even at marriage, the conversation is largely also about that how one needs to take care of the family, all of it. I think going back, just taking a step behind, the reason you need to take care of yourself is how you do professionally and personally is also a function of how you're able to recenter and align with yourself, which the other speakers have been talking about. So self-care lies at the very basis of what it means to be who you are. Only when we rest is when we figure who we are, how do we, what is it that aligns with us, what are our closest values. And that's the space that allows us to operate from a place of informed conscious choices. My number one strategy, number one tip for anyone when it comes to self-care is, learn to self-soothe. One of the biggest superpowers that each one of us has is that of self-soothing. Self-soothing, in simple words, when we are talking about self-care, we mean physical, psychological, emotional, and interpersonal, all those mixed together. So self-soothing here basically means the capacity that each one of us has to be able to calm ourselves down, to soothe ourselves, to also be able to take care of ourselves. The process of self-soothing is like, like a warm hug that you're giving to yourself consciously. Here is what you could do in the context of self-soothing. Ask yourself, maybe, wherever you're listening, close your eyes for a moment and ask yourself, in the last 1 month, what is it that you did that felt like, which you did alone, that felt like a warm hug? Close your eyes and visualize, and if you're comfortable, type it out, possibly in the chat box. Self-soothing, feel free to type it whenever you're ready. Self-soothing, having said that, is a process that allows our nervous system, our energies to be managed. So let me give you examples again at a physical level, at an emotional level, and a psychological level. A simple way, a simple thing that I can do personally for my self soothing is have that cup of tea in the morning where I'm not talking to anyone. Nobody is calling me for various chores at the end of the day. And in a pre pandemic world, when I ran workshops, women would say things like, I can't even have my cup of tea peacefully. I don't even, can't even, new moms would say things like, I can't even be in the loo and not have at least one or two knocks on the door, right? So, a simple thing like having your cup of tea could be a self soothing ritual. Richa is saying, long walks. Yeah, long walks work for me, and they are brilliant ways of self-soothing, and they are physical ways of soothing ourselves. Kiran is saying, K-drama. Oh yes, that's a massive one, and like totally go ahead with it. And like for me, there are other shows that I watch equally, on various OTT platforms that serve ways of soothing myself. So like watching shows that you love could be a good example of something that auditorily, kinesthetically, also emotionally feels like, it calms you down. It gives you a break from the mundane, the day-to-day task, right? Another example could be psychologically. It could be also like, for example, coloring, whether it's, using adult coloring books, whether it's doodling, or whether for some people, uh, for me, cooking is not a self-soothing ritual. But on the other hand, I have a daughter who finds cooking, self-soothing. So it works for her to calm herself, where she feels she's in charge, at the end of the day. So these are various examples of what self-soothing can look like. So whether it's physical, whether it's emotional, whether it's in the category of psychological, find what is self-soothing for you. Meditation is another one which could help you soothe yourself at the end of the day. Reading, also Simran is saying, audios of Abraham Links and Dr. Joe. Just yes, I think meditation, listening, reading, listening to podcast, all these are brilliant examples of what works for. Yes, painting too. Ritu, thanks for sharing Sonal. Meditation, these are brilliant examples of self-soothing. Now, moving to the interpersonal bit of, self-soothing, which is the second tip there, which is social soothing. We are social beings, whether you are, introverts, whether you're extroverts, or you are ambiverts. Ambiverts are people who lie between introvert, extrovert. So we all, like to be around people who calm us, who center us. So as much as we like moments where, we would want to be around for others, we also love the idea of being around others. So social soothing primarily has to do with figuring who are the people, what are the kind of events, what are kind of a situation that manage to calm you down and help you recenter yourself and engage in self-care. So maybe it's a close friend that you have. It could be one person. It could be talking to your mom every day, or it could be talking to a parent every day. I think one of the biggest losses during the pandemic for a lot of women has been, they feel that there's a certain joy in having the house to yourself. There is also a certain joy in having the privacy of time and having autonomy about what you do, right? So a lot of people, whether working or not, have been talking about how they feel that spaces which were safe spaces for social soothing, like being able to go to a pub, to an exercise class, being able to go to a film festival, are things that people have massively missed during the pandemic. So, quickly let me share some examples, and then all of you, you can type more examples and add to the list for everyone who's watching. Like going to film festivals is hugely social soothing for me. I love the idea of meeting new people, watching exciting films, all of it combined together. Second, I would love going for, book readings, book festivals, and being part of it. And that's something which brilliantly works at the end of the day for me. Figure what social soothing that works for you at the end of the day. And, going back to the choice narrative, I think the important thing is schedule self care. Don't wait for it to just happen to you at the end of the day. Very, very simple things like going to a salon, and maybe you should tell me if you agree with this. Going to a salon, just getting your eyebrows done, getting, your nail paint done. So many women during the pandemic have talked about even those very simple acts allowed them to step away from home, their responsibility, be in a different space, and it allowed them a possibility of getting hosted, right? And even those small micro interactions kind of provided them soothing. So ask yourself, what does social soothing look like for you? I think moving forward, I'm going to share, something from my personal life. At about 7 to 8 years back, I struggled with, a patch in my life where two, three of my clients, on a particular day mentioned to me as to how I'm looking pale and I look extremely tired. I had been feeling tired, but till the time I think somebody mentioned this, I don't think I ended up, maybe taking this, so seriously. And as a result of which, when they said it, I kind of realized it. And I realized that that what was happening in that particular moment was that I was struggling with a burnout and there was low blood pressure. My burnout was showing up in the form of, low blood pressure. And I think ever since then, what I've learned to do and engage in is what I even talk about in my book as pause rituals. When we say pause rituals, what we basically mean is our ability to engage in activities whereby we can monotask and do one activity at a time and consciously build pause into our daily life, one thing at a time. So building pause on a one-to-one basis is something which is very, very important. And the reason I came up with the term pause ritual is that rituals are something which we do regularly. It's not something that happens to us. So I think it may be very important to build your own pause rituals. The key to pause rituals is to learn to recognize that pause rituals are activities that you monotask and you do only one activity at a time, and you engage in an activity which is self-soothing. uh, I think, last couple of tips, before we can, end. I think the first important one, the fourth important one would be hit the iron when it's cold. This applies to both men and this also applies to women, which basically means that learn to respond to situations when you have calmed down. Choose to step back, take some time for yourself before you respond to any situation. And this applies to each and every one out there. We all need to hit the iron when it's cold. And I think the last one, the big one, is I think, as women, ask yourself that how can you, on a daily basis, work towards allowing yourself to be hosted, which others also have been talking about, which is the larger narrative of, calling friends, reaching out for help, being vulnerable. and breaking the myth of being someone who also consistently is someone, who always has things under control. Allow yourself that self compassion, and also that safe spaces where you can be hosted, where you can be taken care of. A huge bit of self care is also about knowing when to step back and let others step in. So the last tip would be know when to step back and step in. Sometimes only when you step back will others end up, stepping in. So you need to make a choice to step back and allow others to step in. And I am going to, end here. And yes, and I hope no matter whether you're in your life, act one, act two, act three, it's always a good time to begin with self care. And if there's ever a time when we need self care the most, then this is the time where we need to exercise self care. Thank you so much.